Imagine waking up one morning and sensing, almost instinctively, that the world around you is fraying at the edges. Conversations feel thinner. Entertainment prizes noise instead of depth. Headlines obsess over celebrity gossip while ignoring the forces reshaping our very lives. In this strange era of limitless information, genuine wisdom seems more elusive than ever. Today, we're venturing into a challenging but essential question. Why does society appear to grow more foolish every single day, and what can we do about it? Stick with me until the very end, because the final insight I'll share can transform the way you see the modern world and your place in it. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video with someone you care about. Tell me in the comments what you believe is happening to our society. By speaking up, you're not just reacting. You're joining a community committed to waking up from the haze of mediocrity and reclaiming the power of deep thinking. Let's begin. To understand why our culture seems to sink into an abyss of superficiality, we must confront an uncomfortable truth. The very tools we were promised would elevate human knowledge, technology, social media, mass education, are often used in ways that dull our minds rather than sharpen them. Think about the paradox. Humanity holds the greatest library in history at its fingertips, more knowledge than every previous generation combined. Yet attention spans are shrinking. Critical thinking skills are eroding. More and more people struggle to tell truth from deception. In our rush to consume information, we've forgotten how to digest it. Philosophers and psychologists warned us of this long ago. Friedrich Nietzsche described the last man, someone who avoids depth, lives for comfort, and evades anything demanding true thought. Does that sound familiar? Where convenience triumphs over wisdom, we see the last man everywhere. Media theorist Neil Postman also foresaw this in Amusing Ourselves to Death. He predicted a culture where entertainment becomes the lens for all reality, reducing serious matters into spectacles designed to capture fleeting attention. Why has this shift accelerated so dramatically? Part of the answer lies in how our brains react to stimulation. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman's research on human thinking revealed that we naturally seek the path of least resistance, preferring fast, easy answers over slow, deliberate reasoning. Modern society exploits this weakness. Social platforms, advertising, and even political messaging are engineered to trigger our emotions rather than deepen our reflection. In this environment, stupidity isn't an accident, it's manufactured. Viral memes, trending sound bites, and emotional outbursts dominate our feeds, not because they're true, but because they're simple and thrilling. Compare that to the ancient model of learning. In Plato's Academy, students wrestled with difficult questions for years, debating and refining their understanding. Today's public sphere, by contrast, rewards those who shout the loudest, not those who think the deepest. Ask yourself, when was the last time a trending video or headline genuinely challenged you to think critically about life, society, or morality? How often does content slow you down and provoke reflection compared to the endless flood designed to keep you scrolling? This is our modern tragedy, an abundance of information paired with a famine of wisdom, and the consequences are profound. As deep thinking withers, people become more vulnerable to manipulation. Take misinformation. Studies from MIT show false news travels faster and farther on social media than verified facts. Why? Because falsehoods are crafted to be sensational and emotionally appealing, while truth requires nuance, patience, and context. And nuance is the first casualty in a society addicted to speed. This isn't only about individual ignorance, it's about collective decline. As public discourse deteriorates, communities risk losing their capacity for reasoned debate. Politics devolves into tribal shouting matches. Education emphasizes test scores over cultivating wisdom. Entertainment glorifies outrage, scandal, and spectacle. In short, society prefers the shallow over the profound, the immediate over the enduring. Yet within this bleak picture lies opportunity. Recognizing decline can be the first step toward renewal. By understanding the forces pushing society toward stupidity, we can begin to resist them, reclaiming practices of critical thought, reflection, and meaningful conversation. We can rise above the noise and rediscover the clarity that once guided human progress. But here's the challenge. This journey requires courage. It means questioning what's popular, resisting the easy seduction of distraction, and cultivating a mind capable of standing apart from the crowd. As René Descartes once said, "The greatest minds are capable of the greatest vices as well as of the greatest virtues." The same tools dumbing society down can also elevate it, if we consciously choose to use them differently. And that choice begins with you. Think for a moment about your daily information diet. Do you scroll endlessly through your phone, hopping from post to post without retaining much of what you've seen? Do you form opinions on complex issues from headlines, sound bites, and 30-second clips? If so, you're not alone. This has become the default behavior our society is trained into, and it's one of the key reasons intelligence is being replaced by distraction. Psychologist Steven Pinker explains that the human brain adapts to its environment. When constantly bombarded by quick bursts of content, our minds adjust by craving brevity, even at the expense of depth. Complex reasoning, long-form reading, and patient learning begin to feel unnatural. A skill once strengthened through practice is now at risk of atrophy. The result? A population able to process enormous amounts of shallow information, but increasingly unable to engage with anything requiring sustained attention. This shift is cultural as much as individual. Throughout history, societies valued wisdom keepers, philosophers, teachers, and elders who dedicated themselves to understanding the human condition and passing down insights. Today, these figures are overshadowed by influencers whose primary goal is not truth, but engagement. Algorithms reward popularity, not profundity, confusing fame with wisdom and forgetting that one does not imply the other. Consider modern education. Across many nations, schools have shifted toward standardized testing and rote memorization, leaving little space for critical thinking or creativity. Philosopher John Dewey famously said, "Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself." Yet schooling often reduces learning to a series of checkboxes, training students to perform on exams rather than think for themselves. The consequences are severe. Entire generations approach problem-solving and independent thought as if they were multiple-choice questions with a single easy answer. When people are conditioned to look for quick answers, they become less tolerant of ambiguity, and ambiguity is where true wisdom begins. Carl Jung emphasized that real growth emerges from confronting contradictions within ourselves, embracing our shadow, and navigating tensions between opposites. But in a culture addicted to simplicity, there's little patience for that kind depth. We prefer false certainty to the complexity that demands effort. This addiction to certainty has been weaponized. Politicians, advertisers, and media companies all understand that people are more easily swayed by confident, simple statements than by careful, nuanced arguments. Society becomes flooded with slogans instead of ideas, sound bites instead of philosophies. The result isn't just a dumbing down of discourse, but an erosion of democracy itself. A population unable to think critically is a population easily manipulated. Reflect on how often you've seen people arguing passionately online about topics they clearly don't understand. How many comment threads overflow with anger and absolute certainty but lack evidence or reflection? This is what happens when confidence is rewarded more than competence. As Stephen Hawking warned, the greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. Perhaps the most alarming symptom of our decline is a collective loss of memory. In the past, cultures preserved wisdom through stories, traditions, and texts spanning centuries. Today, digital media floods us with new content every second, only for it to vanish as quickly as it arrived. What's trending today is forgotten tomorrow. Philosopher George Santayana warned, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." In a society addicted to novelty, the past becomes irrelevant, and the lessons that could guide us are drowned out by the constant rush of the new. Yet, amid this crisis, a possibility still exists. If stupidity spreads through habits of distraction and superficiality, then intelligence can grow through habits of reflection and depth. We can choose content that challenges us rather than numbs us. We can practice the art of slow reading, deep listening, and meaningful dialogue. These aren't merely personal choices. They're acts of resistance against a culture that profits from our passivity. One simple but powerful step is to reclaim silence. Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard warned that busyness and noise prevent us from truly knowing ourselves. In today's world, silence is almost revolutionary. In quiet moments, we can reflect, analyze, and reconnect with our deeper selves. By embracing stillness, we resist the constant pressure to react and rediscover, our capacity to think. Another practice is relentless questioning. Socrates built his entire method not on handing out answers, but on asking deeper questions. Imagine if society embraced that mindset again. Instead of rushing to judgment, we'd pause to ask, why do I believe this? Who benefits from my believing it? What evidence supports it? Such questions slice through the fog of misinformation and force us to engage reality more honestly. But here's an uncomfortable truth. Thinking for yourself is not easy. It's often lonely because it requires stepping away from the crowd. It's painful because it forces you to confront cherished illusions. Yet precisely this difficulty makes it valuable. Immanuel Kant urged humanity, dare to know, have the courage to use your own reason. This is the essence of enlightenment, and it remains as urgent today as it was in Kant's time. Pause and ask yourself, are you living in ways that strengthen your mind or weaken it? Do you feed your intellect with wisdom and reflection, or do you allow yourself to be carried by the current of distraction? Your answer determines whether you're part of the problem or part of the solution. If you've made it this far, you already sense something isn't right with the way modern culture shapes our thinking. We've looked at technology, social media, education, and attention spans. But there's a deeper layer still: values. A society's intelligence isn't only measured by how much information it processes, but by the quality of the values it upholds. When those values decay, even the most educated population can drift into collective foolishness. Throughout history, civilizations rose not just on technological advances, but on moral and philosophical foundations. Ancient Greece celebrated reason and debate. The Renaissance reignited curiosity and humanism. Even in dark times, communities preserved libraries, teachings, and traditions because they believed wisdom was worth safeguarding. Contrast that with today, where moral relativism and instant gratification often outweigh patience, duty, and long-term thinking. This loss of values appears everywhere. In politics that prize short-term wins over future generations, in business models that exploit attention rather than nurture creativity, and in entertainment that glorifies outrage and scandal over courage and insight. A culture that rewards vice will eventually get more vice, and a culture that rewards virtue will get more virtue. Right now, the incentives tilt heavily toward vice. Add to that the cult of convenience. We've been taught to equate easy with good and difficult with bad. Yet the very process of thinking critically, developing expertise, and cultivating wisdom is inherently difficult. It takes time, humility, and perseverance. When society elevates convenience above all else, it quietly undermines the very traits needed to stay intelligent. Neuroscience gives us a clue why this matters. The brain's prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and higher reasoning, strengthens through challenge, not ease. Just like muscles, mental faculties grow with use. When a culture removes friction, it also removes opportunities to develop mental strength. In this way, comfort can become a silent form of control, keeping citizens docile while convincing them they're free. Take consumer culture as an example. Endless choices, instant delivery, and constant entertainment create the illusion of abundance. But abundance without discernment can become noise, and noise drowns out meaning. We end up overwhelmed, paradoxically less satisfied despite having more. This psychological trap, sometimes called the paradox of choice, leaves us restless, distracted, and craving stimulation instead of fulfillment. Meanwhile, our collective narratives, the stories we tell about who we are and what we value, have grown fragmented. In the past, myths, religions, and national stories gave people a sense of belonging and purpose. Today, those unifying narratives splinter into 1,000 competing feeds, each algorithmically tuned to reinforce its own tribe. Without shared meaning, public discourse collapses into suspicion, cynicism, and rage. Think about how easily outrage travels online. Outrage fuels engagement, and engagement fuels profit. But outrage also narrows our minds, making it harder to listen, empathize, or consider alternatives. Philosopher Martha Nussbaum warns that societies ruled by fear and anger inevitably erode compassion and justice. If intelligence requires openness, then outrage culture is a direct assault on intelligence itself. So how do we reclaim our values? The answer begins with individuals but can ripple outward. We must consciously choose what we reward, both in ourselves and in our communities. We must celebrate courage over conformity, depth over spectacle, and patience over instant gratification. We must model these choices so others see alternatives to the mainstream current. One powerful practice is cultivating long-term thinking. Ask yourself not only what feels good now, but what creates wisdom 5 years from now. Every book you read, every habit you form, every conversation you engage in, these shape your future mind. A society of people thinking long-term cannot be easily manipulated. It becomes resilient, adaptive, and genuinely intelligent. Another is practicing gratitude and humility. Intelligence without humility becomes arrogance, and arrogance blinds us to our own errors. Socrates claimed to be wise only because he knew how little he truly knew. In a world obsessed with hot takes and instant expertise, humility is radical. It creates space for learning, dialogue, and mutual respect, the soil where genuine intelligence grows. We must also rediscover service. Modern culture glorifies self-promotion and individual achievement, but collective intelligence emerges when people contribute to something larger than themselves. Volunteering, mentoring, and sharing knowledge freely are all acts of service that strengthen communities and pass wisdom forward. Rebuilding values doesn't mean rejecting technology or progress. It means aligning them with principles that elevate rather than degrade us. Imagine social platforms designed not to addict but to educate. Imagine education systems that prize curiosity and resilience over memorization. Imagine leaders rewarded for foresight and integrity rather than spectacle and division. None of this is impossible. It simply requires a shift in what we choose to celebrate. Ultimately, the question isn't just why is society getting dumber, but why are we allowing ourselves to be? And just as importantly, how do we choose something better? Every cultural renaissance began with individuals refusing to accept mediocrity. They read deeply, thought carefully, acted courageously, and inspired others to do the same. You can be one of those individuals. As Viktor Frankl wrote, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Even when society seems locked in decline, each person retains the power to realign their own life with truth, courage, and wisdom. That's how revolutions of the mind begin. Not with mass movements first, but with a single mind choosing clarity over confusion, discipline over distraction, and meaning over mindlessness. If enough of us make that choice, society can rediscover its lost intelligence. It won't be easy. It won't be instant. But history shows it's possible. Every age of darkness is followed by an age of awakening. The question is whether we'll participate in that awakening or sleep through it. We've explored technology, education, attention spans, and values. Now comes perhaps the most difficult but also the most liberating part of this journey: taking personal responsibility. It's tempting to blame the system, the elites, or society for dumbing us down, but history shows something powerful. Cultures change because individuals change first. The German philosopher Goethe once wrote, "Let everyone sweep in front of his own door, and the whole world will be clean." In other words, before we demand intelligence from others, we must cultivate it in ourselves. This isn't a passive process. It's an ongoing practice of daily habits, intentional choices, and courageous questioning. Start with your environment. What you consume, who you surround yourself with, and how you spend your time all shape your mind. If you feed your brain with shallow noise, your thinking becomes shallow. If you nourish it with depth, reflection, and disciplined learning, your thinking becomes deep. Curate your digital spaces. Follow thinkers instead of influencers. Replace doom scrolling with deliberate reading. Even 10 minutes of thoughtful reflection each day can rewire your attention over time. Next, reclaim your time. In a culture designed to monetize your attention, your focus is your freedom. Protect it as you would protect your home. Schedule time for thinking the way you'd schedule a meeting. Turn off notifications. Practice single tasking instead of constant multitasking. When your mind is not constantly interrupted, it regains its natural ability to focus and reason. Also, take care of your body. It's impossible to separate mental clarity from physical health. Regular exercise, sleep, and a balanced diet don't just improve your body. They sharpen your cognitive abilities. The Stoics were right. Self-mastery begins with self-care. In a society addicted to overstimulation, rest becomes a radical act of resistance. Then, cultivate intellectual humility. No matter how much you learn, remain open to being wrong. Seek out ideas that challenge your assumptions. Debate respectfully. Ask more questions than you give answers. This mindset transforms learning from a chore into an adventure. Remember, it's not the volume of knowledge you possess, but the quality of thinking you practice that makes you wise. Read deeply. In a world of snippets and summaries, full-length books are an antidote to shallowness. Choose works that have stood the test of time, classics of philosophy, literature, history, and science. These texts act like mental weightlifting, training you to sustain attention, wrestle with complex ideas, and recognize patterns across eras. Writing also sharpens thinking. Keep a journal. Summarize what you've learned. Challenge yourself to explain complex ideas in your own words. If you can teach it clearly, you truly understand it. Over time, this practice builds mental clarity and confidence, making you less susceptible to manipulation. And don't underestimate the power of community. Find people who value depth, curiosity, and honesty. These may be friends, online forums, study groups, or mentors. Surround yourself with people who push you to think better, not just people who agree with you. True dialogue, where ideas collide and evolve, has always been the engine of progress. Another overlooked skill is emotional regulation. Intelligence isn't only about logic, it's about managing the emotions that influence our decisions. Practice mindfulness, breathing exercises, or meditation to reduce reactivity. When you can stay calm in the face of provocation, you gain the clarity needed to discern truth from manipulation. Over time, these habits form a self-reinforcing loop. Depth of thought leads to better choices, which create a more stable life, which frees up more energy for depth of thought. This is how you gradually break free from the cultural pull toward distraction and superficiality. But let's be clear, this path isn't glamorous. It won't earn you instant applause. It requires patience in a culture obsessed with speed, courage in a culture obsessed with approval, and discipline in a culture obsessed with ease. Yet, precisely because it's difficult, it's transformative. As Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Reclaim your time, and you reclaim your mind. There's also a spiritual dimension to this. Many traditions, from Buddhism to Stoicism to Christianity, have emphasized detachment from worldly noise to connect with something greater than ourselves. Whether you frame it as God, the universe, or simply a deeper self, finding that center allows you to stand firm while the world swirls around you. From that place of centeredness, intelligence becomes more than information. It becomes wisdom, Indio. The end. Personal responsibility means refusing to outsource your thinking. It means developing your own criteria for truth, your own methods of evaluation, and your own internal compass. This doesn't mean rejecting expertise or collaboration. It means participating actively rather than passively in your own understanding. Once enough individuals adopt these habits, society itself begins to shift. Cultural tides change not by decree, but by accumulated daily choices. If millions of people consume thoughtfully, engage respectfully, and practice critical thinking, the algorithms, institutions, and incentives will adjust. Supply follows demand, even for wisdom. This is the real revolution. Not slogans, not outrage, not waiting for someone else to fix it, but one mind at a time, reclaiming its power, rediscovering its capacity for depth, and radiating that clarity outward. The world doesn't just need more information. It needs more people who can turn information into insight, and insight into action. When you choose to think deeply, you're not just improving your own life. You're creating a ripple effect that can reach far beyond you. Someone watching you read, reflect, or speak thoughtfully may be inspired to do the same. Each act of reclaiming your mind plants a seed for a more intelligent, compassionate society, and that ultimately is the hope this video offers. Society may appear to be getting dumber, but you don't have to follow that trend. By taking ownership of your mind, your values, and your habits, you become living proof that another path is possible. We've traveled far in this exploration, through technology, attention spans, values, and personal responsibility. Now we conclude what it all means and how you can turn insight into action. Because knowledge without application fades, but wisdom practiced daily can transform your life, and by extension, society. Let's face it, we can't single-handedly reverse every trend. You can't personally change the algorithms of giant tech companies or rewrite school curricula overnight. But you can control your own mental diet, your own habits, your own environment. By doing so, you model a different way of living, one that sparks curiosity instead of passivity, depth instead of distraction, and courage instead of conformity. Think of this like planting a forest. One seed by itself seems insignificant, but a million seeds reshape the landscape. Every book you read, every thoughtful conversation you have, every moment you spend questioning rather than consuming, that's a seed. When enough seeds are planted, culture shifts. It's how intellectual renaissances have always begun. You might wonder, but will anyone notice? They already do. When you show up as someone calm in a crisis, thoughtful in debate, and curious rather than judgmental, people feel the difference. You become a living antidote to the noise. As more people embody this mindset, it begins to scale. So how do you sustain this transformation? By turning practices into principles. Don't just dabble in reflection. Make it a daily habit. Don't just sample difficult books. Build a library and keep returning to it. Don't just unplug occasionally. Design a lifestyle where your attention isn't constantly auctioned off to the highest bidder. Treat your mind like sacred ground and guard it with intention. Also, share what you're learning. The internet can be a wasteland of outrage, but it can also be a treasure trove of thoughtful communities, podcasts, and discussions. Use your platforms to elevate good ideas, recommend books, highlight nuanced arguments, and point people toward quality resources. In a landscape of clickbait, the generosity of insight stands out. This is not about perfection. You'll still get distracted, fall into rabbit holes, or find yourself tempted by the easy path. But the key difference is awareness. Each time you notice yourself slipping into passive consumption, you can gently redirect. Over weeks and months, that redirection rewires your brain and your habits. Keep your sense of humor. Intelligence without lightness can become brittle. Laugh at the absurdities of modern life, including your own missteps. Humor keeps you humble, and humility keeps you learning. Remember, the goal isn't to feel superior to others, but to contribute to a more awake and compassionate society. Finally, cultivate patience. The results of deep thinking are slow but profound. In a culture of instant gratification, patience is a superpower. When you're patient, you're harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, and more capable of long-term action. This calm persistence is how revolutions of thought outlast the noise of the moment. If you need inspiration, look back at those who came before. Thinkers, reformers, scientists, and artists across history all faced environments that discouraged deep thinking. Yet they persisted, often in solitude, sometimes in exile. They wrote books, launched movements, and challenged norms. They weren't superhuman. They simply refused to let society's mediocrity define them. You have that same capacity. The choice now is yours. Will you be another passive consumer, swept along by a tide of distraction, or will you become an active participant? Your own consciousness shaping your mind as carefully as an artist shapes clay. This decision, repeated daily, is how you reclaim your intelligence and, by extension, your freedom. When you change yourself, you influence others. When enough individuals shift, society itself changes. And that's the quiet revolution we're talking about. Not violent, not flashy, but steady, persistent, and ultimately unstoppable. The tools of distraction can be turned into tools of education. The same platforms used to spread misinformation can also distribute wisdom. The same culture that rewards outrage can begin to reward depth, if we demand it. So here's your invitation. After watching this, don't just click away. Take one concrete step toward reclaiming your mind. It could be deleting an app, starting a journal, reading a challenging book, or scheduling time for silence. Do something today that your future self will thank you for, and share this journey. Send this video to someone who might benefit from it. Start a conversation. Ask a question. You never know whose life you might touch, whose thinking you might spark. Together, we can form a countercurrent to the tide of distraction, a community of people committed to clarity, courage, and wisdom. Remember, society only seems to grow more foolish when its individuals stop striving for wisdom. But when individuals rise one by one, the collective rises with them. In closing, I'll leave you with this. Intelligence is not just what you know, but how you live. It's not a badge to display, but a practice to embody. Every moment is a choice, toward distraction or toward depth, toward noise or toward clarity, toward passivity or toward purpose. Choose wisely, and your life becomes proof that another way is possible. Thank you for watching, for thinking, and for daring to be different. The world needs you.